Please remain standing as we read God's law together. If you're visiting with us, we're working through the Ten Commandments, which are found in Exodus chapter 20. Now the Lord God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord Yahweh, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing steadfast love to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. This, the word of the Lord, God spoke from the mountain in the midst of thunder and lightning. You may be seated. Heavenly Father, bless this reading and the preaching of your word, O Lord. May you stir our hearts to greater love and honor and reverence for you, and may you truly be the Lord, our God, and may we be your people with a full heart. In Jesus' name, amen. This morning we come to the second commandment, which I can paraphrase as, don't make images as a way of worshiping me. I get angry about it. Where the first commandment deals with the content of our worship, who we worship. The second commandment deals with the manner of our worship, or how we worship. God not only says, I don't want you to worship the gods of the nations around you. He says, I don't want you to worship me the way the nations around you worship their gods. Because I am a different God, that is to be reflected in the different manner of worship. Indeed, the nature of our God and the nature of Jesus Christ shapes the form of our worship as Christians. It is properly so. Who we worship is to determine how we worship. And in order for us to understand this commandment and how it applies to us today, after all, I don't know how many people you know who have idols of pagan gods in their home made of wood or gold or stone, and who actively sit down in front of them and kneel before them and pray before them. So how does this apply to the modern world? Well, first we need to remember what we discussed last week. Because God made us as worshiping creatures. We were designed to reflect His glory, to image His glory in the world. And though I don't have time to expand on this statement this morning, one of the reasons God forbids us to create images in worship is because God has already given us an image and placed His image in the world in you and me. Now, there are a lot of consequences that come from that, but again, I wish I had time to go there today. But the main thing is that as God's image in this world, we are a mirror. And we are designed to reflect His glory and His character and His work in the world around us. And whatever we worship, whatever we revere, we come to resemble. We reflect it It begins to shape the way that our hearts and minds and our souls and our bodies operate. In Adam's original state, he was focused on God and he submitted to God, and he was a perfect reflection and resemblance of God's holy character. Man was God's representative image on the earth, and man saw God in his holiness as his creator, and Adam knew that he was the creature. Adam knew he did not control God, but God controlled him. He did not direct God's power, God directed his power. And in his worship and service to God the Creator, Adam's duty was obedience to the word that was given to him. What you have said, we will do. That is, until he didn't. When Adam ate of the forbidden fruit, when he sinned, everything about his worship relationship with God changed. Where God was the creator and he was the creature. God's was the power and the authority, and his was submission and a rule under God. Sin inverts the order and puts man on the throne. It blurs the creator-creature distinction and seeks to make God represented and present in the very material things of the world. And so Adam claims God's prerogatives as his own, and you and I claim God's prerogatives as our own. He no longer submits to God's word, and in submitting, honors and loves and trusts and is on good terms with God, but he begins to fear God. And in his fear, he seeks to contain, control, and direct God's power. In our sin, we want God to be a servant of man. What I have said, you will do, O God. What great pride, what arrogance, what haughtiness and loftiness is ours. And this exchange for the glory of the Creator, for the glory of the creature, this exchange of God's authority to my authority, God's power to my power, God being over creation to God being under creation. This is at the core of pagan worship. In fact, of all sinful, man-centered worship. And it lies behind the making of graven images, the making of idols. Rather than submitting to God as he has revealed himself to us, the making of images seeks to subject God to our own wills for our own benefit. How so? Let me explain. First, we need to understand the nature of idol worship in paganism. And then second, we will contrast this with true worship. So you actually only have 2 points this morning. Compare and contrast. First, we need to understand idol worship. J. Dalma writes, even pagans believed that their gods lived in the heavens. But while on the one hand the gods are far away, on the other hand they are also nearby in their images. The image represents the deity. One who has an image meets the deity himself in it. The power of the deity is collected and channeled by means of the image. In this sense, the use of an image to commune with your God, whether that's Ra or Zeus or Baal or Yahweh, the use of an image to commune with your God is a type of magic. And so the word channeling fits here. It was a means of containing and controlling your God, to bring him into your home, to tame his chaotic and uncontrollable nature for your own benefit. Dalma continues, the comparison can be made with electricity. High voltage is dangerous. So too is divine power. High voltage is fatal if we cannot control it. And in the same way, the image of a deity functions like a breaker box within your house. The high voltage is limited and channeled so that we can use it safely. It was this channeling of divine power that gave form to the particular look of a graven image, of an idol, why it was a particular animal or shape or had certain features. The gods of the pagan peoples are always imaged in ways that capture their power and their domain. So think of the gods of Egypt and how they are depicted in hieroglyphics and in the pyramids and other places. They were identified by the head of the animal that was appropriate to the particular domain that the god was over. So take Horus. I'm Horus. God of hunting and of the sky. What does he have the head of? Of a falcon and a hawk. Take Anubis, the god of death and cemeteries. What does he have the head of? The head of a jackal. Or Sobek, god of the Nile, has the head of a crocodile. In each case, the god is imaged with something that contains and controls and captures their domain. This conception of making idols is also shaped Mesopotamian and Greek deities as well as Roman deities. Take Aphrodite. Though we're familiar with her flawless naked form standing on a seashell, a lot of the idols of Aphrodite and in Roman culture, Venus, actually the household idols featured either multiple or enlarged breasts and exaggerated hips. And it wasn't because the Greeks and the Romans thought that that's what Aphrodite actually looked like. It captured her power over fertility and the nourishment of life. And so when the worshipers of these fertility goddesses had intercourse near their talismans, near these household idols, or at the totem poles of Asherah among the Canaanites, they thought they were tapping into Asherah, Aphrodite, Venus's power over fertility and would help you get pregnant. And this pagan conception of making idols to capture and contain gods is most clearly captured in Exodus 32. When the Israelites made the golden calf, they were operating under the old Egyptian framework. There the Israelites stand before a mountain that is wrapped in fire. And they're hearing angelic trumpets blaring. They're hearing a voice out of the darkness and out of the fire. And there's lightning and there's earthquakes. And they're terrified. And rightly so. Not only that, Moses has disappeared. He's been gone for a long time in that fire. He's probably dead. So they're overwhelmed, they're confused and frightened, and they come to Aaron. And what do they say? Get up, Aaron, make for us the God who literally, make for us the God who walks before our faces. Make for us the God that we're seeing there. As for this Moses, we don't know what's become of him. And so, if you pay attention to the way the Hebrew is written in Exodus 32, the Israelites did not intend to worship a false god through the golden calf. They intended to worship the true God through the golden calf. Thus, when he crafted the golden calf, Aaron comes back and says, "This is your God, O Israel, that brought you out of the land of Egypt." He's saying this golden calf is the authorized idol of Yahweh. What were they doing? The Israelites wanted to appease Yahweh in his fierce display of power. They wanted to make this relationship that was so terrifying, they wanted to make it safe. They wanted to make God safe. And so they create this transformer, this breaker box of God's divine power and ground it in the image of a yearling calf. And once they had Yahweh so contained, what did they do? Chapter 32, verse 6 says, they declared a feast, and they made sacrifices. And then the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And that rose up to play, that communicates, according to some commentators, sexual activity. How can they treat, like God's still on the mountain, the lightning, the thunder, the cloud, the smoke, it's all still there. How can they just declare a feast, do some sacrifices, and then just get on with business and play around? How can they do that when they see it right there on the mountain? Nothing has changed about that. It's because they presume that they have God contained. They presume that God is under control, that he's safe to be around. In particular, the idea of taking a calf, or better, a yearling bull, arose from pagan idolatry. A yearling bull was a symbol of power, often associated with Baal, and so it was the power over crops, power over lightning, and rain and fire. In Egypt, the sacred bull was known as Apis, who is the herald or manifestation of Pa, one of Egypt's creator gods. But here, that pagan notion from either Canaan or Egypt or both has infected Israel's conception of Yahweh. And they are using that image to control Yahweh and to make him safe. Thus, the point of making idols in the ancient world and in pagan places around the modern world, it's not to make invisible gods visible. That's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to make the incomprehensible God comprehensible, and to make the all-powerful God manageable. But to do this is to upend the very attributes that make God God. God, who is all-powerful, cannot be contained. He even says to Solomon, when Solomon builds this temple, is this going to contain me? Even the heavens can't contain me, let alone a temple made by human hands. To do this converts the eternal God to an image created by man. It places man in the driver's seat, and it uses the crafted image as a means of containing, controlling, and directing God's power to where you want it to go. And this is one of the reasons that idol worship, or worshiping the one true God through the use of idols, is so offensive to God. Because the idol is not actually connected to God in any way, shape, or form other than the worshiper's own imagination. Thus, Yahweh sees images not as meaningful worship, but as a threat, and that makes him jealous. Next week, we'll come back and look a little bit more at God's jealousy and what he has to say about the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. But for now, let's devote our attention for a little bit to the other golden calf that shows up in the Old Testament. The two golden calves that Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, makes. When Israel splits into the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, Jeroboam, who's the king over the 10 tribes of northern Israel, he has a problem on his hands. God's instituted Jerusalem and the Temple of Solomon as his ordained place of worship. So how can I remove that tendency for all of my people to go to the other kingdom to worship? That's just going to lead us back to reunification, and I don't want that. So he knows a story. Oh, we had a story in the Bible, in the Old Testament, where God was worshiped through the image of a yearling bull. Let's do that. And so he creates 2 more golden calves. He places one at Bethel and one at Dan. He says to Israel, look, you don't have to go all the way to Jerusalem to worship Yahweh. You can worship Yahweh at either of these locations. It's convenient for you. I've made worship very convenient for you. You don't have to travel this far. You've got a church right near you. But what does God say? God said to Jeroboam, you have done evil above all who were before you, and have gone and made for yourself other gods and metal images, provoking me to anger, and have cast me behind your back. Therefore, behold, I will bring harm upon the house of Jeroboam, and will cut off from Jeroboam every male, both bond and free in Israel, and I will burn up the house of Jeroboam as a man burns up dung until it's all gone. God saw the attempt to worship him through these golden calves not merely as a misguided attempt to worship. You could really do better. He saw it as worshiping other gods, even though that was not Jeroboam's intent. He saw it as idolatry. To give the worship that is due to Yahweh alone to images, to icons that are supposed to represent him and connect you to him, arouses God's jealousy. God's jealousy is aroused not just by worshiping other gods, but worshiping him through false stand-ins, through unholy methods. Imagine, if you will, a husband gets a body pillow made with his wife's face on it. And in the night, he snuggles up to the body pillow. It's comforting whenever she's away on trips. He takes the body pillow with him to the mall and out to eat. It sounds absurd. But would any wife be pleased with such a situation if it were to actually happen? Would she not properly be jealous and frustrated with her husband? But baby, it's you. No, it's not me. It's a pillow. Show me some love. Show me some attention. God's the same way. God does not want to be worshiped and loved through stand-ins, through figures and pictures. He wants us to love him directly. He wants us to commune with him directly. And that brings us to our second point, to understanding true worship. In Deuteronomy 4, verse 15, Moses says to Israel, "Therefore watch yourselves very carefully. Since you saw no form on the day that the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the midst of fire, beware lest you act corruptly by making a carved image for yourselves in the form of any figure." That's Deuteronomy 4:15. So what God says here in Deuteronomy 4 is the manner of God's revelation of himself to us is to shape the manner of our worship of him. I'll say that again. The manner of God's revelation of himself to us is to be reflected and shape the way that we worship him. God explains that since Israel saw no form when Yahweh spoke to them on Mount Sinai, Israel is not to try to worship God by means of any form. Rather, what did Israel see? Dropping down to the end of the chapter, Deuteronomy 4:35 through 40 says, "To you it was shown that you might know that the Lord is God. There is no other beside him. Out of heaven he lets you hear his voice, that he might discipline you. And on earth he let you see his great fire, and you heard his words out of that fire. And because he loved your fathers and chose their offspring after them, and brought you out of Egypt with his own presence by his great power, driving out before you nations greater and mightier than you, to bring you in, to give you their land for an inheritance as it is this day, know therefore today, and lay it to your heart, that the Lord is God in heaven and above and on earth beneath. There is no other. Therefore you shall keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you today, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may prolong your days in the land that the Lord your God is giving you for all time." What Israel saw at Sinai was God's redeeming power and his fire. And out of that fire, they heard something. They heard God speak his word. They heard God give commandments. Therefore, Israel's worship was not to be centered around images, but around obedience to his revealed word. Because what they experienced was the voice of God speaking to them, what was to shape and define their worship was obedience to his revealed word. One of the most important things that sets God apart from idols and from false gods in Scripture is this, that God alone speaks to his people. Yahweh defines himself as a living and true God. And how can he make such a claim? Because of his great acts of redeeming power, but mostly because he speaks a living word to his people. And none of the pagan gods had that. None of the pagan nations heard directly from their God. The word of God always came through witch doctors and oracles and high priests that you couldn't enter into their mysteries. There was no direct access to God among the nations, but in Israel there was direct access. God redeemed his people and he spoke to them directly. Consider what Scripture says. Psalm 135, 15 through 18. We looked at this last week. "The idols of the nations are silver and gold, the work of human hands. They have mouths but do not speak. They have eyes but do not see. They have ears but do not hear, nor is there any breath in their mouths. Those who make them become like them, and so do all who trust in them." Contrast this with Ezekiel 12:25. "For I am the Lord. I will speak the word that I will speak, and it will be performed." Or Isaiah 55:10 and 11, "For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven and do not return there, but water the earth, making it spring forth and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes out from my mouth. It shall not return to me empty, but it shall accomplish that which I purpose, and shall succeed in the thing for which I sent it." Or again in Deuteronomy 4, "Did any people ever hear the voice of a God speaking out of the midst of the fire, as you have heard, and still live?" Christian, God reveals himself to us, not primarily in physical forms or in signs or in wonders, not in images, not in animals or plants. The way God primarily reveals himself to us is in his word. It's how we know him. And in hearing and obeying and honoring that word, that is how we worship. That is how we are to worship. Because it's the way that he reveals himself to us. And his word is the very thing that created life. It breathed into our first father's lungs. Our God and our God alone, among all the pretender gods of the nations, is a God who speaks to his people and gives life to his people through the word itself. Thus, the Westminster Shorter Catechism says, the Second Commandment requires the receiving, observing, and keeping pure and entire all such religious worship and ordinances as God has appointed in his word. The word and God's word alone, what he has said we are to do, and nothing else, that is how we worship. It is a limiting principle on how we worship God. We can't worship him in any way we choose. We can't approach God with any things we would like to see happen in the worship service. We can only do in worship, God will only accept in worship what he has told us to do. And to do that in worship is pleasing to him. And it may seem that this is a restriction of our liberty, of our freedom, but remember, we are at our most free when we are most submitted to God. Because we were made to worship God in the way that he wants to be worshiped. We are actually committing to various forms of slavery when we worship God in any other way. And so again, our confession says that if we worship God in ways that he hasn't commanded, if we worship God through images, if we worship God with things that sound good to us, if we worship God according to the strictures of some super spiritual people who tell us this is what you should do in worship, then what we're actually doing is we're betraying true liberty of conscience. Because God alone is Lord of the conscience and has left it free from the doctrines and commandments of men, especially as it pertains to faith and worship. And thus, biblical worship is grounded in God's spoken word. It's centered around the reading and exposition of God's word. It involves the recitation and the singing of God's word. We pray the word. Even the sacraments are visible manifestations, visible rituals, which embody the message of the gospel. And the reason we only have two, baptism and the Lord's Supper, is because those are the only two that God has commanded. We can't just say, well, that sounds good. Well, let's make that a sacrament. The sacraments, as instituted by Christ, are not substitutes for the spoken word either. The Lord's Supper is not a substitute for the spoken word. It is an illustration and application of the spoken word, of the gospel. And not only that, but biblical worship is grounded and centered in Jesus Christ, who is the incarnate Word. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Jesus is the Word made flesh. He tells the disciples, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. But notice this. Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. But where in the Gospels does it tell us what Jesus' hair color and eye color are? What his height was? What kind of clothes he wore? He says to you and me, if you've seen me, you have seen the Father. Well, how do we see Jesus? When the Gospels show us Jesus, they show us two things. They show us his redeeming power, evidenced in miracles and signs and in the cross, and his spoken word. The same things that God revealed, the way that God revealed himself to ancient Israel. How he delivered and did mighty signs and wonders, and all that pointed to, we should listen to what he says. Again, Jesus is the revelation of God's word to you and me, and so our worship must flow through Jesus and through Jesus alone. There are no other mediators. And even if we were to make an image of Jesus, again, that would be a substitute. It's trying to channel who Jesus is through some sort of image. We may not intend it that way, but there's a very powerful thing about the image and about images of Jesus, is they shape what we think of them. They shape what we think of him. If you watch The Chosen, which I haven't watched, and I'm not going to rail on today, but if you watch The Chosen, that picture of Jesus shapes the way you think of Jesus. It just can't not. The picture of Jesus that we've all seen in our old churches with the long hippie hair, maybe a lamb in his arms, that shapes our view of Jesus. There's actually a time, Steve Nichols writes, he writes there was a time back in the 1800s where the masculine Jesus was a big thing. And so there were images of Jesus with muscles and like grit. Every time we make an image of Jesus, we risk making a picture of Jesus as we wish him to be, or we want people to know him as. The power of the image is very subtle. And it's why throughout history, even with images of Jesus, thoughtful, conscientious believers have said, no images of Jesus whatsoever. The danger is too great to try to contain and control and limit Jesus and make him somebody after our image, after submitting to it, instead of submitting to his word and becoming after his image. Rather, biblical worship should be defined as communion with God through communication with God. Biblical worship is communion through communication. Worship at its core is a conversation between God and his people. And what God wants from you in worship, he wants to hear from you. He wants you to talk to him. He wants to hear you sing. He wants to hear you pray. He doesn't want you to be an observer, a passive participant. He wants to hear your voice so that he can hear and respond with grace and forgiveness and encouragement and sanctification. And he wants you to hear his voice. He wants you to find encouragement and courage in his voice. He wants you to be in awe of his voice. He wants you to love his voice. He wants you to fear his voice. He wants you to apply the words that you hear today and change your life to be more in conformity to his word. Christian worship is God speaks to us and we respond to him. It's not about sacrifices and offerings. It's not about religious or emotional experiences. It's not about excellence and good order. Biblical worship is about communing with God by hearing him speak to us and we speaking back to him. He hears our prayers and acts on them, and likewise, whatever he has said to us, we will do. So as James writes, be doers of the words and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like. But the one who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, which is what we're doing today, one who looks in the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. In marriage, it's easy to treat doing all the right things as what keeps a marriage healthy. It's easy to treat going on dates and giving gifts and doing acts of service, even having regular sex, is what keeps your marriage healthy. However, while all these, quote, love languages are important, it is ultimately regular, intimate communication that keeps a marriage healthy. It's what keeps a couple, a husband and wife, one is knowing one another by speaking to one another. And if a husband and wife aren't talking, they're drifting apart. Men, if you aren't speaking to your wives and if you're not listening to your wives, you're drifting apart. Wives, if you're not speaking to your husband and if you're not listening to your husband, sometimes it's hard to listen because we don't say much, so you need to draw us out a little bit. But if you're not hearing what we're saying, we're drifting apart. But not only must we be communicating with one another, we must hear and act on what the other person communicates to us. Doesn't matter how many words are spoken. Men, if you are ignoring your wives, regardless of how much they're talking, communication is not happening and your marriage is unhealthy. Wives, regardless of how little your husband says, but if you aren't listening to what he means by the few things he does say, if you're not responding tenderly and humbly with the few concerns he does raise, then you're not actually one. You're two individuals living in the same house. And the same is true of biblical worship. God speaks and we hear and obey. We speak, God hears and responds. So as we conclude, Second Commandment's not really about artistic representation at all, is it? Rather, the Second Commandment is really about our posture before God, how we approach God, and whether we're willing to do it directly or if we're looking for a way to approach God outside of Jesus. If we're looking to control God rather than to be controlled by God. Phil Ryken writes, we make an idol whenever we turn God into something that we can manipulate. And this is the whole point of pagan idolatry. So much contemporary spirituality tries to do the same thing. People are always looking for a more user-friendly God, a God who can be adapted to suit their purposes, a God who will allow them to sit on the throne rather than demands they submit to his rule. So they say, if I do this, God will do that. If I touch the minister, then I will be healed. If I will fulfill my vow or give generously, then God will make me rich. If I say the right prayer every day, I will have the key to unlock God's blessing. If I follow the right parenting method, then my kids will grow up to be godly and well adjusted. Friends, this is all a transactional approach to God, which is to say, a pagan approach to God. We don't give to God in order to get. And as soon as we approach God, giving and doing in order to get what we've done is we become idol worshipers. Not because we've made an image and we're kneeling in front of it, but because we're trying to control and contain God and bend him to our wills. When God commands us not to make idols, he is saying that he will not be captured, contained, assigned, or managed by anyone or anything for any purpose. God wants us to trust Him and obey Him and not use Him. So I ask you, Christian, how are you doing with idolatry? How are you trying to use the things of God, even things maybe He's rightly ordained, as a means of getting what you want out of Him? Manipulating Him, controlling His power to where you want it to go? Or are you willing to be directly exposed to His Word, directly exposed by His Word, and whatever He says to you to do, you'll do it? One is true worship, one is idolatry. Let's pray.